Developing the knight early prepares for central control and offers flexibility in launching an attack. Immediately contesting the center, d5 stakes a claim, directly challenging white's knight and opening lines for development. Instantly challenging black's central pawn mass, this gambit opens diagonals for piece activity. Solidifying the center pawns now prepares for potential pawn pushes or piece development, anticipating white's aggressive intentions. Establishing central dominion, white boldly stakes a claim on the d4 square, aiming to build a formidable pawn presence. Developing the knight to f6 now solidifies the d5 pawn, gracefully preparing for the eventual c6 or dxc4 while aiming central influence. Asserting central influence, white solidifies the d4 pawn and prepares to develop the bishop, eyeing the queen side. Solidifying the center, black prepares to support the d5 pawn and potentially build a formidable pawn chain. Securing the d4 pawn and preparing for a potential fianchetto, this solidifies white's central grip. Solidifying the center's pawns, this knight tucks away, preparing for potential queenside expansion or defensive maneuvers. Developing the bishop to this active square sets up the potential for a kingside attack and solidifies central control. Safeguarding the king and preparing for castling, this development elegantly bolsters the pawn chain's integrity. Securing the monarch is paramount, allowing pieces to develop freely and prepare for central action. Solidifying the king's safety is paramount. Now, focus on developing remaining pieces harmoniously. Preparing to fianchetto the queen's bishop unlocks a long diagonal, eyeing black's central pawns and offering flexibility in pawn structure development. Challenging the central pawn structure, this bishop aims to unpin the knight and prepare for a potential kingside expansion. Developing the bishop to a more active diagonal, the plan is to support the pawn on c4 and potentially eye black's king later. The queen mobilizes, eyeing central squares and preparing for potential queenside operations. Pressuring black's bishop on b4 clarifies the pawn structure and may force a decision about its future. Strategically, repositioning the bishop to d6 aims to prepare for kingside expansion and offer the bishop for active play. Solidifying the center and preparing for kingside expansion, this queen redeployment seeks to unburden the kingside pawns. Embracing pawn exchanges now liberates central space for the queenside army. Opening the b-file now allows for potential queenside pressure. Initiating a pawn advance into the center often disrupts harmony and creates dynamic possibilities. Reactivating the rook on the e-file establishes a dynamic attacking presence, eyeing potential breakthroughs against black's central pawns. Preparing to activate the rook and challenge the center's pawn structure creates dynamic possibilities. Invading the queenside with the knight opens up new tactical possibilities, aiming to disrupt black's pawn structure. Exchanging knights here simplifies the position, creating a more open center and potentially freeing black's pieces for action. Recapturing the pawn opens lines and creates a favorable battery for white's queen and bishop. Preparing a kingside pawn storm, this liberates the bishop from its restrictive diagonal. Shifting the queen to c3 aims to pressure the d6 bishop and prepare for potential queenside expansion. Unleashing the f-pawn disrupts white's central control and opens lines for black's queenside. Seeking to consolidate central presence and prepare kingside expansion, white repositions the bishop to a more robust diagonal. Pushing forward the e-pawn creates immediate spatial tension, but potentially weakens your king's defenses and limits your piece's mobility. Expanding pawns to seize more territory, threatening to confine black's bishop. Repositioning the bishop to a more active diagonal aims to challenge white's central control and prepare for potential queenside expansion. A forceful strike, seizing the initiative and exposing the king's defense. Prioritizing king's safety by retreating the monarch addresses the immediate pressure and prepares to regroup defensively. Unleashing a central pawn thrust, white seeks to exploit black's slightly cramped king and open lines for attack. opening a diagonal for the dark-squared bishop, eyeing the white king's castled position and challenging central control. Striking the knight resolves the tension and opens possibilities, but may create a less secure dark square complex for black. Re-establishing knight's central presence now challenges white's imposing pawn wedge and opens avenues for counterplay. Opening the central file for artillery deployment signals an aggressive intent to exploit the weakened pawn structure. Establishing a strong diagonal presence for the bishop, it now aims to assist the central pawn and potentially target the white king's defenses. Opening the d-file now exploits black's awkwardly placed pieces, creating immediate pressure against the isolated pawns and potentially disturbing the king's safety. Reclaiming the pawn allows black to solidify their central pawn structure and prepare for future piece activity. Reclaiming the d-file, this rook surge unbalances the position and pressures black's defenses. Bringing the rook back to a more active central file is a logical defense, aiming to contest the open d-file and avoid being passively squeezed. Reclaiming the queen offers immediate material and opens a vital diagonal for the rook, while simultaneously forcing black to defend their newly exposed king.